High in the constellation Taurus, on a clear winter night, a tight, shimmering knot of stars, known as the Pleiades, dominates the sky. Viewed with the naked eye from a dark location, most observers see exactly 6 bright points of light. Despite this visual reality, ancient cultures across the globe universally referred to this specific cluster as the Seven Sisters. Humanity named a celestial object after a star that is effectively invisible to the unaided eye. Greek mythology describes 7 sisters being pursued across the heavens by the hunter Orion until Zeus transformed them into stars to ensure their escape. This story is echoed in ancient Aboriginal Dreamtime songlines, where 7 sisters flee across the land and sky to escape a lustful hunter. European, African, and Native American cultures all utilized a lost sister motif to explain the missing 7th star, suggesting one sibling went into hiding, was abducted, or passed away. This creates a significant geographic problem. Australian Aboriginal cultures had no contact with the outside world for over 50,000 years, yet their narrative matches the Greek version with startling precision. Entirely isolated civilizations share an identical story about a star that isn't there. Stars are not fixed points in the sky. They travel at immense speeds through space in a process known as proper motion. By utilizing precise data from the Gaia Space Telescope, astronomers can calculate the historical trajectories of these stars with extreme accuracy. This diagram shows the trajectories of the Pleiades. Rewinding 100,000 years, the cluster's shape changes. Atlas and Pleione were separated by a wide angular distance, distinct to the naked eye. Over millennia, their visual perspectives slowly converged, blurring into a single point of light from Earth. Early human observers 100,000 years ago actually saw 7 stars in the cluster. These early humans living in Africa were looking directly at this 7-star sky. This map illustrates early populations radiating out of Africa, reaching Europe, Asia, and Australia. Migrating groups carried the 7 Sisters story as a foundational myth. As Pleione and Atlas merged, isolated cultures independently added a lost sister motif to reconcile their inherited story. This shared global myth represents a collective memory tracing back to the origin of our species. This implies that a specific astronomical narrative has survived intact for roughly 4,000 generations. Modern assumptions often characterize oral history as a degrading game of telephone that loses accuracy over time. However, indigenous cultures utilized rhythm, song, and dance as a rigorous error-correcting code for their data. Altering a single word or concept would break the rhythm of the performance, ensuring the story was transmitted with rigid accuracy through the centuries. Oral tradition is a resilient technology capable of preserving information far longer than physical mediums. We see the earliest physical recording of this knowledge in the Lascaux cave paintings, where a cluster of dots was placed precisely above the shoulder of a bull 17,000 years ago. This obsession continued into the Bronze Age with the Nebra sky disk, which depicts the cluster with 7 prominent gold inlays. While these artifacts provide physical evidence of our interest in the stars, the story itself remains alive in our global cultural consciousness. About 12,900 years ago, a warming Earth abruptly reversed course. Temperatures plummeted, triggering a brutal deep freeze across the northern hemisphere lasting over a millennium. The casualties of this sudden shift were massive. Across North America, 37 entire groups of large animals, megafauna like mammoths and mastodons, were completely wiped out. Humans suffered as well. The Clovis culture, known for distinctively flaked stone tools, vanished from the archaeological record at exactly the same time. Scientists named this mysterious frozen era the Younger Dryas, a nod to a small, cold-hardy white flower that quickly spread across Europe as ice advanced. Many assumed these animals were hunted to extinction by expanding human populations. However, new Bayesian regression models compared thousands of radiocarbon dates for humans and megafauna, finding their population sizes fluctuated independently. Growth in human hunting groups didn't actually track with the decline of the animals. The sudden climate crash was the true killer. But that leaves a massive cold case. What earthly or cosmic force could freeze a warming planet so quickly? The prime suspect among most climate scientists is water, specifically a massive flood from a melting inland sea known as Glacial Lake Agassiz. As the great ice sheets retreated, this enormous lake burst its banks. Thousands of cubic kilometers of freshwater rushed through northern valleys and poured directly into the ocean. That freshwater flooded a system called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC. Because freshwater is lighter than saltwater, it sat on the surface, capping the ocean and stalling the global conveyor belt of currents that transports tropical heat northward. The mechanics of this flood hold up under scrutiny, yet for a faction of researchers, a melting glacier felt too gradual. They believed the violent, immediate die-off of the megafauna pointed to something much more sudden. In 2007, an alternative theory emerged. Proponents suggested Earth had passed through the Torrid complex, a dense field of debris left behind by a disintegrating 60-mile-wide comet. Instead of a single crater, they proposed that fragments of this comet detonated mid-air over the North American ice sheet, triggering continent-wide wildfires and throwing up enough soot to block the sun. Proponents pointed to a soot-rich layer of soil called a black mat, which is found at roughly 50 Clovis Age sites. They argued this layer was literal ash from those catastrophic fires. Within that same layer, they reported finding nanodiamonds and magnetic spirals. On paper, these materials appeared to be the signatures of an impact, substances forged by the intense heat and pressure of a strike from space. The theory gained even more ground with the discovery of the massive Hiawatha crater, which sits buried under a kilometer of ice at the edge of Greenland. It is a highly seductive idea. A cinematic strike from space offers a clean, instant explanation for a complex mass extinction. But science requires independent verification. When geologists put the comet theory on trial, those individual pillars of evidence began to crumble. High-precision dating of the rocks in Greenland revealed the Hiawatha crater is actually 58 million years old. It formed long before the first mammoths ever walked North America. Independent laboratories then scrutinized the soil. They found that the nanodiamonds and magnetic spheres weren't unique to an impact event. They were actually common materials that naturally accumulate in wetland environments over thousands of years. The final collapse came in early 2026. The academic journal PLOS One forcefully retracted several flagship papers supporting the impact hypothesis. Editors discovered the authors had misidentified simple marine plankton as cometary dust. Even worse, they had used artificial intelligence tools to write the research, resulting in dozens of entirely fabricated academic citations. The comet suspect has been officially ruled out. Sensational narratives often dominate the headlines, but the rigorous, self-correcting process of peer review ultimately separates fact from fiction. This is a chart showing temperature data extracted from Greenland ice cores. Look closely at the exact moment temperatures plunge downward. Embedded in the ice right around this drop, researchers found a significant spike in platinum and osmium. But the timeline doesn't match a sudden impact. The chemical anomaly appears 45 years after the cooling phase actually began. While these metals can come from space, they are also found deep within the Earth's mantle. Massive fissure eruptions in Iceland, which lasted for decades, can expel these specific elements into the atmosphere as volcanic aerosols, which then settle into the ice sheets. The reality of the Younger Dryas is a 1-2 punch. First, the massive flood of glacial meltwater weakened the ocean currents. Then, a severe volcanic winter from Iceland pushed an already destabilized climate past its breaking point. The megafauna didn't die from a space rock. They were caught in the complex failure of Earth's own interconnected ice, ocean, and volcanic systems. Our planet's climate machinery is fragile and devastating enough entirely on its own.
The Department of Defense has failed every single comprehensive financial audit in its history. Trillions of taxpayer dollars remain completely unaccounted for, swallowed by an opaque ledger system housed inside the Pentagon. Documents like these reveal the mechanism of that secrecy. By routing funds into unacknowledged special access programs, or USAPs, defense contractors can legally bypass congressional oversight, leaving nothing behind but redacted milestones and blocked timelines. Decades before these dark money streams triggered modern congressional inquiries, a high-level insider attempted to trace exactly where those missing trillions were going. His investigation led him deep underground, and it ultimately cost him his life. Phil Schneider was a trained structural engineer and a geologist who maintained high-level security clearances for the United States government. He was born into the intelligence apparatus. His father, Otto Schneider, was a former German U-boat captain integrated into U.S. naval intelligence following World War II through Operation Paperclip. Schneider carried severe and permanent physical trauma. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand, and his torso bore a jagged, deep-tissue scar stretching from his throat to his abdomen. Schneider represents a unique friction point between documented defense history and a narrative that sounds like science fiction. He was a man with a professional pedigree who carried wounds that his official resume simply couldn't account for. During his public lecture tours in the mid-1990s, Schneider detailed exactly how the military's missing trillions were being spent. He claimed the black budget financed the construction of 129 deep underground military bases. This map represents the infrastructure he described: continent-spanning nodes connected by hypersonic maglev trains operating in complete secrecy. This cross-section illustrates his 1979 assignment. His engineering team was ordered to drill deep shaft tunnels to expand a massive 7-story subterranean complex. The operation took place in an incredibly remote geographic sector of northern New Mexico, directly beneath the rocky plateau of Archuleta Mesa. During the excavation, Schneider's drilling equipment breached a pre-existing subterranean cavern. What followed was a chaotic, close-quarters firefight between U.S. Delta Force operators and a hostile group of non-human entities wielding exotic blue energy beams. 60 human personnel died in the subterranean crossfire. Schneider was one of only 3 survivors, suffering a direct hit from a radiation weapon that burned across his chest and vaporized his fingers. That encounter in the dark ended Schneider's career as a military contractor. He spent the rest of his life traveling the country, attempting to expose the clandestine architecture he helped build. On January 17, 1996, police discovered Schneider decaying inside his Wilsonville, Oregon apartment. The medical examiner ruled the death a suicide by strangulation, but the physical mechanics of the act made that ruling nearly impossible. The autopsy found a rubber hose wrapped tightly 3 times around his neck and knotted, an act requiring manual dexterity and range of motion that Schneider's missing fingers and shoulder injuries simply didn't allow. The scene showed signs of targeted removal. While cash and valuables remained untouched, his lecture notes, an unfinished UFO manuscript, and his family photograph archive vanished. Verification was further hampered when blood and urine samples collected during the autopsy were destroyed before independent investigators could secure them for toxicology testing. The combination of missing documents, a lack of bloodwork verification, and the manual impossibility of the act creates a signature of staging rather than suicide. For a man who spent years warning he was marked for death, the final scene in Wilsonville looks more like a professional execution. The details of a subterranean alien firefight remain unproven. Yet Schneider's underlying warning that a massive, illegal black budget is hiding advanced technology from the public is now being debated on the floor of the U.S. Capitol. In 2023, high-ranking intelligence officer David Grush sat before Congress and swore under oath that the government is running illegal crash retrieval programs. Grush testified that a deeply entrenched military-industrial complex is successfully evading all congressional oversight through intimidation and extreme compartmentalization. Recent leaks detailing a program known as Immaculate Constellation align with this testimony. This hyper-compartmentalized naval intelligence structure mirrors the exact clandestine architecture Schneider attempted to expose 25 years ago. By burying these projects deep within unacknowledged special access programs, a localized group of defense contractors and officials can operate with total impunity, immune to the checks and balances of a democratic society. We may never verify the origins of the scars across Phil Schneider's chest, but whether he was a man lost in a delusion or a contractor murdered for what he knew, he accurately mapped the structure of our modern shadow government long before anyone else was willing to look.
In 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were a middle-class couple living in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Barney was a World War II veteran and postal worker, while Betty was a social worker with a degree from the State University. As an interracial couple and civil rights campaigners, navigating America in the early 60s brought constant societal surveillance and systemic hostility to their lives. To find a temporary escape from their high-pressure environment, the couple took a belated honeymoon trip to Montreal and Niagara Falls. On the night of September 19th, they were driving back home, navigating the isolated roads of the White Mountains in their 1957 Chevy. The Hills' status as grounded, respected professionals in their community made their subsequent claims difficult to dismiss as mere fantasy. South of Lancaster, Betty spotted a bright, erratic light moving strangely against the night sky on an otherwise empty road. The object began actively pacing their car, matching their speed, before rapidly descending to hover roughly 100 feet above the highway. Barney stopped and looked through his binoculars. Through the craft's illuminated windows, he saw humanoid figures in glossy black uniforms staring directly back at him. He fled back to the car and sped away. Moments later, a rhythmic, metallic buzzing violently vibrated through the car's trunk. A sudden, overwhelming drowsiness washed over them, and their conscious memory of the drive stopped entirely. This abrupt severance of consciousness left the couple with a gap in their personal history that they could not fill. When they arrived home at dawn, the kitchen clock read 5:15 a.m. A drive that should have taken 4 hours had somehow taken nearly 7. Bizarre physical damage soon surfaced. Barney's leather binocular strap was cleanly severed. The tops of his best dress shoes were deeply scraped, suggesting he had been dragged. Betty's dress was torn and stained with a pink powder. Both of their wristwatches had stopped permanently, and they found magnetized circular marks on the trunk of their car. This timeline outlines their route. Between their last conscious moment and their recovery near Ashland, there is a 35-mile stretch of road that their memories cannot account for. To the Hills, the physical evidence meant that their missing time was the result of a tangible event rather than a dream. 10 days later, Betty began having recurring nightmares of being taken aboard a spacecraft and examined by humanoid figures. Barney developed bleeding ulcers, severe hypertension, and a mental block regarding the drive that left him unable to function. They reported the sighting to the Air Force, only to be told they had likely misidentified the planet Jupiter. To save their health, they sought out Dr. Benjamin Simon, a psychiatrist who used hypnotic regression to treat traumatic amnesia in World War II veterans. Seeking clinical help placed the couple in a controlled environment where the events of the missing hours began to resurface. Under hypnosis, Barney relived the encounter with visceral panic, screaming as he recalled the hypnotic gaze of the beings on the craft. Both recalled being taken aboard for medical procedures. Betty described skin scrapings and a long needle inserted into her navel for a pregnancy test. The sessions recorded moments of cultural disconnect. The beings were baffled by Barney's removable dentures and the human experience of aging. Betty recalled being shown a 3-dimensional hologram of interstellar trade and exploration routes by a leader on the ship. Betty sketched this map after her sessions. Years later, amateur astronomers matched her drawing to the Zeta Reticuli star system. The alignment fueled decades of debate between those seeing proof of contact and skeptics seeing random points. The specific details we cover here, invasive medical exams, unexplained missing time, and gray-skinned beings, establish the narrative elements that would define the abduction genre for decades. While the hypnosis relieved the couple's anxiety, Dr. Simon concluded they were suffering from a folia do, a shared fantasy. He theorized that Betty's nightmares had been absorbed by a highly suggestible Barney, mutating into shared false memories under hypnosis. He argued that this fracture was a reaction to the extreme societal surveillance and stress the Hills faced as an interracial couple in 1961. The Hills rejected this diagnosis. They continued to point to the physical evidence, the torn dress and scuffed shoes, as proof of a physical capture. Whether the Hills experienced a physical abduction or a psychological fracture caused by the pressures of their era, their story became the primary source for the modern world's understanding of alien encounters.